Daniel, Jackie has the contact details to get in.
Yeah. Jane sent it again to her, just to make sure.
And where is she?
Well, I'm still waiting for her. Hey, we just got 70.
US just joined?
Hey, I just got a, what's this now? That shouldn't be on.
What we need is Jackie. Is there anybody at the embassy we can call to find out where the heck she is?
This just came in now.
Hmm.
I have a picture here, which I'm not asking for. And actually, we should see, what is this?
Is that somebody else's presentation? Yeah, because you're up in the top corner.
Look, I'm not sharing a screen with anybody, so I'm not supposed to have a.
No, but they're sharing.
I don't know what this is. What the hell? Just,
Where's Jackie?
having an issue here, and I don't know what this is.
Well, it was the American Chamber of Commerce, Kevin speaking. Okay, great. Okay, nice. Jackie is joining shortly. It was crazy. Yeah?
Jackie Meeker, right?
Meeker, yeah. Now the thing disappeared. Now
So
I'm seeing-
Daniel, do we have everybody signed in, or do we still have people who need to be signed?
There's still people coming in. We're now on 74. You see, I'm supposed to see.
So some people are signed in but without video.
I'm not supposed to see this name here. That's very strange.
Someone can presenter. You're still a presenter.
Yeah, I am muted. Sorry to keep you all waiting, but we just got a call from the US Embassy, and our host will be there any minute. So thank you for your patience. Hi, Tony, how are you? Just for your information, you probably see a bunch of links which are already in the chat box. Those are useful links which you, of course, can click on. And there are a lot of answers to some questions you might have already. So feel free to go through that. We will, of course, go through a set of questions which had been asked already by people, but nevertheless, the chat box is open for you to ask any additional questions you may have, which will then take place after Mrs. Meeker from the US Embassy will then be finished with her presentation. Thank you.
But
Oh, we're really sorry about this, everybody. It seems that the US Embassy have problems signing in. We're just trying to sort out with them what the problem is, and we just want to apologize for the wait. So sorry about this. Maybe we should all have a sing-song. Bear with us.
Thank you, Jane. It's appreciated.
It's a perfect example of how a webinar shouldn't go on, isn't it? I'll probably get sacked in the morning. How to keep 90 people in a room and we're not doing anything.
It happened. It definitely happened. It's so nice to see so many people attending this event, so which is really, really great. I think some people were asking for the links. I'm not sure if the links, because Daniel said they were in the chat, and most of the attendees are correct. It's not in the chat. So
Yeah, well, when Daniel gets a minute, he'll probably put them into the link on the side. So just wait, we'll get them up though, definitely.
that's great.
I think it's the evening for technical problems, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's cute. Somebody says, what would you want to sing? Okay, what song do we want to sing? God Bless America? I don't know.
I'd say we're going down, down, down. We'll sing it to rap music.
That's so funny. So somebody says, it will cost you if he sings.
I'm just thinking, and thank God this is a free event that you're not paying.
Yes. Well, I think it's important information. Everyone will definitely wait, unfortunately it happens. So, but thank you everyone for having your patience. Please go and get a glass of wine if you're in Luxembourg, a cup of coffee if you're in New York, New Jersey, United States, or a glass of wine. It doesn't matter.
I think we're going to have to heavily edit this.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. One of our the immigration lawyer says we should sing Neil Diamond's song, Coming to America. Or in the case of COVID limitation, we're not coming to America for now. Very funny, Steve.
can you put the camera on me somehow or other?
Yeah, it is.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. If you can all hear me, somebody wave. Listen, we are having a little bit of a challenge for the moment with the American Embassy, with Jackie Meeker getting in. I'm sure we'll get that sorted out. But in the meantime, the one thing that I thought would be a good subject to cover is Tony had brought up to us that many of our guests from the United States who've joined us tonight, welcome and thank you all, have also asked questions about how do you go ahead and get into Luxembourg. Originally, we were primarily focused on doing this about how do you get into the United States, and that's the subject that Jackie's going to speak about. But Tony also said it would be nice to have information about people who want to get into Luxembourg. What do they have to do? How do they have to do that? So we reached out to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and they were kind enough to, we invited them to go ahead and join us, and they said, no, they weren't sure they wanted to join us, but they had all the information on the web, their website. And but then I at least had time to go ahead and have about a 2-hour conversation with them and make sure that I understood so that I could explain it to you. We have a slide we'll put up a little bit later, But the bottom line is that for the moment, Luxembourg is not open for tourists. They are not looking for people to come into Luxembourg on tourist travel from outside of Europe. If you're in Belgium, or if you're in Germany, or if you're in France, if you're within the EU, you can go ahead and come in. But if you're coming outside the EU into Europe, Luxembourg is not open for tourists. But of course, there are exceptional circumstances that can be used so that people can get in. I see that Jackie has just joined us, but let me finish this little bit anyway. So if you're a third country national and a long-term resident, or you're a person who has the right of residency and you hold the long-term visa, you can come into Luxembourg. If you're a healthcare worker, cross-border worker, seasonal worker in agriculture, which I don't think we'll have too many from the United States, diplomats, international people, if you have passenger travel for imperative and duly justified family reasons, i.e. you have relatives living in Luxembourg, or if you're applying for international protection, which I hope we don't have people from the United States doing, or if you're coming here to study, or last category is you're a highly qualified business professional, then you can go ahead and send an express request for a special certificate to service.mae.etat.lu. And they will go ahead and they will review the circumstances and approve. But the simple explanation is Luxembourg is not open for tourist travel. However, in family reasons or other appropriate reasons, it might be possible. For those of you who would love to come here to our beautiful country, have to wait a little bit longer, I'm afraid. And having said that, Jackie has just joined us. And Jackie, it's nice to see you tonight. And Jackie knows everything there is to know about getting into the United States. And I really appreciate her coming with her expertise. You know, in talking about this, we all said this is kind of a fast-moving train, and these rules are subject to be changed all the time. So we wanted to give you an opportunity to talk to an expert. Jackie will tell you everything that exists today, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to be different next week. So when we have information, we'll pass it on. Information will always be on the American Embassy website as well. But at least we wanted to start giving you a little bit of a first update. And with having said that, I'd like to introduce you all to Jackie Meeker, who is the consul at the United States Embassy in Luxembourg. Jackie, thank you very much for joining us. And the microphone is yours.
Oh, that's perfect. Thank you so very much. I really appreciate you inviting me to be here this evening. There is a lot of information to share. It's a very confusing time with COVID, so I'm very happy to have the opportunity to be able to speak to your members and to the others who are joining the webinar. And thank you for those to those who are attending today, because I know that you'll take this information that we present this evening, and then you'll spread that word and get more information to people who may be needing it just now. So I do appreciate you attending, and thank you to the Chamber of Commerce for hosting the event. We have a very good relationship, the Chamber of Commerce here in Luxembourg, with the US Embassy, so I'm very appreciative of that partnership and happy to be here tonight. As was said, it is absolutely true that the things that I'll be telling you this evening are current as of today, but they could change, and they often do change. And I'll give a couple of examples of that as I move through the presentation. What I'll try to do is be as specific during the presentation as possible, but also I want to leave a lot of time at the end for questions, because we have very good information right now, and it should help you plan for your summer travels or, you know, for going back to the United States in the future. But I do understand that it doesn't cover absolutely every scenario that you might have specifically for yourself. So as was said, I'm Jackie Meeker. I'm the consul here at the US Embassy, and I've been here in country almost 2 years now. I joined the Foreign Service back in 2014 after doing many other things in my life, the most important of which for me was being a parent to my children. But I'm thrilled to be here in Luxembourg, which is an amazing, beautiful country full of history and culture, and we've been so fortunate to be stationed here. So there are a couple of different things that I'd like to address. There are a couple of different categories of people, categories of travelers who have questions regarding going to the United States. There are US citizens or lawful permanent residents who may want to return home or may want to return home just temporarily to visit or that kind of thing. Can they go to travel to the US? There are those individuals who may live in the Schengen area and may have an ESTA, an electronic travel authorization, or a visa. There are those folks who may live in Luxembourg, but are from other parts of the world and want to go to the US. So all of those have kind of very specific details that I need to share with you regarding traveling to the US. And let's get started with the US citizens first of all. I'll answer the most common questions that we receive here at the embassy from US citizens and lawful permanent residents. As a US citizen or a lawful permanent resident, you can return to the US at any time. In any circumstances in your life, there is never going to be a ban on you returning to the United States. Right now, of course, you have to have a COVID test in order to do that. And so it's very important that you plan ahead so that you can get a COVID test at least 3 days in advance, no more than 3 days in advance. And the US government has made that a bit flexible. You'll notice it's not 72 hours, it's 3 days, which means that if you are flying on a Friday, you would backdate that for 3 days. So that's Thursday, Wednesday, Tuesday. You could be tested on Tuesday and that will be valid on Friday when you fly. Always the best thing to do is connect with your airline, whichever airline you're flying on, because they sometimes might have additional requirements that you need to be aware of. And they will tell you what form that you need to supply to prove that you've had that COVID test. Is it on the results on your phone? Is that going to be acceptable, or do you need to print something? The best case scenario is for you to contact your airline to answer that question. Okay, so US citizens can go home at any time. What if a US citizen is married to a non-US citizen? That individual is covered under the presidential proclamation, and spouses of US citizens can also travel to the United States. You do not have to travel together. You can travel separately, but if the non-US citizen spouse is traveling alone or not with the US citizen, they should carry a copy of their marriage certificate and a copy of the US passport of the US citizen. The marriage certificate proves the qualifying relationship, and the passport copy then proves that that person is a US citizen. Likewise, children of US citizens may also travel to the United States, even if they're not US citizens themselves. So if you are under the age of 21 and unmarried, those are the two requirements for children of US citizens to travel to the United States. So if you are a parent of, or if you're a parent of a US citizen and the US citizen child is living in Luxembourg, and they're under the age of 21 and they're unmarried, you can accompany that child back to the United States. Okay, so if you have, for example, an 18-year-old child who has both German and US citizenship, and you're the mother of that child and you're not a US citizen, and your child wants to go to school in the United States and you want to see them safely settled there, you can accompany that child because that child is under the age of 21, is unmarried, and is a US citizen. And you as the parent can then accompany that child to go back to the US. So spouses of US citizens, children of US citizens, and US citizen children with their parents can go back to the United States, aged under 21 and unmarried. That's really the most critical thing you need to know as a US citizen. I believe that the Chamber of Commerce has put in our chat function on this webinar the Luxembourg consular email address. If you have specific questions regarding that, you can send us an email and we're happy to help you navigate all of what that means under the presidential proclamation. Next, I'd like to move on to a person who holds an ESTA, which is an electronic system travel authorization. Those are for visa waiver countries. The Schengen area encompasses 26 visa waiver countries. And there are a couple of different things that are going on right now regarding travel from the Schengen area. If you have a valid ESTA, Right now, you cannot travel to the United States for tourism purposes. You can't travel, unfortunately, for major life events. For example, if you have a daughter in the United States who's going to have a baby, you can't travel there right now. If you have a son who's graduating from college and you want to attend, that's not acceptable. And unfortunately, you can't travel under the presidential proclamation. People from the Schengen area, if you want to travel to the United States right now, you must have a national interest exception. That is something that we would enter electronically at the embassy. You don't receive a document for it at all. You just communicate with us via email. You explain your circumstances, indicate why you qualify for a national interest exception. That's carefully considered here, and if it falls within the requirements and the regulations that we've received from Washington, then it may be possible to grant a national interest exception to you. However, you need to be aware that as of March 3rd, the requirements for a national interest exception changed. And now a traveler will need to qualify under a critical infrastructure need in the United States, critical infrastructure, of which I think there are 12. We've also put in the chat function a link to those critical infrastructure definitions so that you can take a look at that. Those are for business travelers primarily. And please note that managers and executives and people going back to the United States for business meetings typically will not qualify. You have to be able to demonstrate hands-on interaction in the United States where you're actually fixing something. Perhaps you are a mechanic who really needs to go and fix a particular machine that is producing a certain product that has an impact on the national infrastructure. So it's very, very specific. And there is information on our website regarding national interest exceptions. We also have a link in the chat function to our visas in particular, which lists all of that information and has other links so that you can go and look at the critical infrastructure and try to figure out if you are an exception, if you could be considered as an exception. If you were to be granted a national interest exception, you need to understand that it's only good for one trip into the United States, and that if you exit the United States, you would need to be reevaluated if you wanted to go back. All of this is in play because of a presidential proclamation that was issued right back after President Biden took office. President Trump before him had implemented it, and President Biden continued it. And so as of January 25th, I believe it was, he re-implemented the national interest exception presidential proclamation. And hopefully, you know, we'll all get beyond COVID and we'll all get back to normal, and that presidential proclamation will be revoked at some point. Unfortunately, I have no insight on when that might happen. We've not received any kind of hint from Washington about when that might be. So right now, for the foreseeable future, that is a restriction that you'll have to abide by. The other group of people that I mentioned were those individuals who are not from a visa waiver country, but maybe are living here in Luxembourg. They are perhaps working at any given place, and they're coming from a different country outside of the Schengen area. And they have a visa to go to the United States normally. They wouldn't qualify for an ESTA because they're from a country that is not a visa waiver country. If you have a visa and your visa is valid and your visa is current, then you could apply for a national interest exception. Again, all of the rules apply, as I previously mentioned, for an ESTA traveler. So all of that still is in place. If the person is here with a passport from a country outside of the Schengen area and does not currently have a visa, then you would need to contact us via email, explain your situation. We'll send you some questions that you need to answer. If the questions that you answer are sufficient that we believe you qualify for a national interest exception, we would then allow you to make an appointment to get a visa here at the embassy. Our visa appointments are severely impacted right now. We have not resumed routine services. And so we are really only doing, oh gosh, maybe 12 or 16 interviews for visas a month. It's really not a lot. If it's urgent travel, we try to work with you as best we can. But it's basically a triage system where we have to make sure that you qualify for a national interest exception before we're allowed to authorize you to come in for a visa appointment. That includes whether or not you've had a visa in the past and you're just renewing, or if it's a brand new situation for you and you would like to go to the US for a certain reason. So we just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware that there are certain limitations that we currently have, unfortunately. We do want to mention though too, this is super important. If you do have an ESTA and you are granted a national interest exception to travel, so you've made your plans, you've got your plane ticket, all of that, do not check in online, because if you check in online with an ESTA, your ESTA will be canceled, because that's just the way that the system is set up right now during COVID. So if the ESTA is canceled, then you will not have a travel document. And you have to have your travel document, either an ESTA or a visa, in order to go to the US, in addition to the national interest exception. So if everything works out well and you are authorized to go and you have an ESTA, don't check in online. We just want to make sure that we mention that to you. So I have a couple of notes here. I just want to briefly look at this to make sure that I'm not forgetting anything of critical importance. So there is a lot. There have been a lot of questions regarding whether they have to quarantine if they went to the United States. If you're authorized to go and you're there. Unfortunately, we can't answer that because, as you know, the United States is comprised of 50 different states, and each state has its own rules and regulations regarding quarantine. So the very best thing you can do is just do a Google search for the health department of that particular state. If you're traveling to Connecticut, for example, just do a quick search for Connecticut Department of Health, and you'll find the link, and then you'll be able to go to that website and you'll be able to find out what their requirements are for quarantining. Okay, so regardless of where you're going in the States, you need a negative COVID test to go. And then you may or may not need to quarantine depending on which state you're going to. We're all really excited about the vaccines that are becoming available. Unfortunately, right now, the vaccine and whether or not you've been vaccinated does not come into play as far as your ability to travel to the United States. The United States right now has not indicated that they're going to be adopting a passport for vaccines, a vaccination passport of any kind. And they have not indicated at all that a vaccine will make a difference with whether or not you're allowed to go into the United States. Right now, you need a negative COVID test. If you're authorized and you have all the appropriate paperwork, you still need a negative COVID test, regardless of what your vaccination status is. So also, I did want to mention, I know that there can be some confusion because things are different here in Luxembourg than they are in the US. The Luxembourg government has been very good to US citizens in granting certain exceptions, especially for long-term partners, for example. So they have granted exceptions for US citizens to come and be with their long-term partner in Luxembourg. The United States has not reciprocated there, and they do not recognize a civil partnership. So if you are married to a US citizen, that's an exception. If you're a long-term partner of a US citizen, unfortunately, that is not an exception and you would not be able to go. So I wanted to mention that as well. So that's a broad overview. I'm sure that there are lots of questions. I know it's a lot of information to take in. So please do take note of the email address that we've provided to you to send us an email about your specific situation, and we'll absolutely answer that. We are very good and very responsive to the email requests that we get. You may not always be able to reach us on the phone because we're doing other things and we're a very small section here at the embassy. But do send us an email because we're very responsive when we get back to you within 24 hours of that email. So now, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Pinch out for bigger view. Okay, well, I think, let me go ahead and look here at some of the questions beforehand.
So we do have some questions which had been asked on forehand already from some people directly to the US Embassy. Would you maybe like me to read them out to you and you can answer them?
Sure, absolutely. That sounds perfect.
Okay, so let's get started. Can you provide a link where I can read the latest and most current information so I can check the details and the actual time of travel? Who knows how things will change between now and then? We have a son and granddaughter in Pittsburgh, and we have Canadian passports. Our travel reason is simply to visit family. Most likely will be enter US from Canada.
So the State Department's overall website is travel.state.gov, travel.state.gov. They always have the very latest information on that website regarding travel to the United States. I'm glad that this question came up because it also sparked a memory for me that I need to make sure that I mention to you. The current travel restriction is for the Schengen area. There are 32 countries in the world that have what's called a regional travel restriction. So all the countries of the Schengen area, Iran, China, Brazil, South Africa, are some of the countries that are subject to this kind of proclamation. That means if you've been in that country or any of those countries within the Schengen area, specifically true to us, in the 14 days prior to arriving in the United States, you're not allowed to enter. However, that also means that it's not because of the passport you hold at all. It's because of the location where you were prior to entering the US. If you were to travel outside of the Schengen area and you went to a country that was not covered by a regional presidential proclamation, then you would be able to stay there for 14 days, and then you could travel into the United States without a national interest exception. So if you have a very important event, I think previously I gave the example of a wedding or perhaps a graduation. I know it's very difficult and this is not possible for everyone, but an option would be to travel to a different that is outside of the Schengen area, that you could then stay in for 14 days, and then you could travel on into the United States without any national interest exception at all. So that is an option for some people. It's not for everyone, of course. So as I said, the travel.state.gov website is probably the best resource for people to bookmark in your web browser so that you can frequently go back and look at the information that's posted there. Whenever we get information at the embassy, it's also posted on that website. We're very good about updating our information, and you can certainly go to the Luxembourg Embassy's website in order to check there as well. We've posted that information on our visas page because that's where the most people go to get the information on how they can travel to the US if they're not a US citizen. So we've provided a link in the chat function to our visas page. That will always be updated. We update that regularly. And if we know that some kind of change is coming, then we make sure that we have everything ready to go, locked and loaded. As soon as we get the word, we click print or publish and it appears. So we're very conscious that people are concerned about this and wanting the latest information. So we're very good about getting the latest information on our website as well.
Okay, question number 2. We have booked a family trip to the US for the summer. We are planning to visit my husband's relatives there. His mother and brother live in Florida. I have no relatives in the US. We are planning to travel together with our daughter, age 10, and the 3 of us live in Germany and travel with German passports. I realize that it is still a few months, so rules may change, but I'd still like to understand what the requirements would be for us as of today. Can my daughter and I actually travel to the US at all? Last summer, my daughter and I wouldn't have been admitted, and we had to cancel our trip at the time.
Yeah. One thing I want to just insert right here to remind folks is that the reason that there is the presidential proclamation that limits travel from the Schengen area. It's really to try to contain the COVID-19 virus. The motives are absolutely pure. We're not trying to be punitive. We're trying to, not allow families to see each other. It really is not the intention. The intent is to keep people safe and limit the spread of the virus so that everyone can travel in the future. That being said, it's not really clear from the author's question whether or not the husband in this particular case is a US citizen. She doesn't mention that. If the husband is a US citizen, if the father of the child is a US citizen, then yes, they can all travel, as we've previously talked about. If they are not US citizens right now, it's not possible to travel for tourism purposes, family reunification, just for visiting, unfortunately, right now. Hopefully things will improve, but as of now, it wouldn't be allowed.
Okay. Question number 3. We will travel to Boston in late June. Will be vaccinated by the time of travel date. Do we need to also do a PCR test? Note that we traveled to Boston in January and there was no check at the airport to see if we were PCR tested.
As we've previously spoken of, vaccination right now does not come into play with regard to determining your eligibility to entering the United States. You would definitely need a PCR test. If you have a national interest exception that allows you to travel, then you definitely need a PCR test at this point. What happens is when you check in for your flight, it is the responsibility to check to make sure that you have had your PCR test and within the right amount of time. It isn't surprising that you weren't checked when you arrived in the United States to make sure that you had the test, because that's the responsibility of the airline, that they need to do that. Because if they didn't, and it were to be discovered that you hadn't taken a test, then it would be the airline's responsibility to pay for you to travel back to your home country. So that's where you are with that. You need the test and you need to prove it to the airline before you fly.
Okay. Question number 4. I was born a Luxembourg citizen in January 1948, 70 years old, retired, and I have been a French resident since January 1990. I was married since August 1981 to an American citizen. My wife passed away in October 2020. Both our children have dual nationality and live and work in California. After reporting my wife's death to the American Embassy in Paris, I inquired whether, as a widower of an American citizen, I was still allowed to enter the USA to visit with my children. The reply was negative. The request for an exemption was denied. Today, I have received my first dose of Pfizer vaccine, and I will receive the second one on April 27th. What can I do to be granted the right to enter the USA once I have acquired COVID immunity and want to visit with my children, grandson-in-law, and wife's brother who live in New Mexico and Pennsylvania, and longtime friends in Vermont? I believe my question applies to all European widowers of American citizens with family living in the USA.
Well, first, let me extend my condolences for the loss of your wife. I'm very sorry to hear that she has passed. It's a very difficult time, COVID, and I know that you want to travel and see, and it's really important for you. Unfortunately, the US Embassy in Paris is correct. There isn't an exception for you to travel right now. It's very difficult. I understand it. I completely do. Unfortunately, until the presidential proclamation is lifted, you won't be able to travel from the Schengen area. However, as I said before, you might consider traveling elsewhere and staying 2 weeks in a different country that is not covered by a regional proclamation, and then you would be able to enter the United States. That's one option for you. I hope that that will work for you so that you can see your family.
All right. Question number 5. We live in Luxembourg. My husband is a US citizen and I am a German. I am not a US resident and I do not have a green card. Our son, also a US citizen, lives in San Francisco. We would like to visit this summer via London. What are the rules to follow?
Okay, this is an easy question. Because you're married to a US citizen, you can travel. Please make sure that you have a copy of your marriage certificate and a copy of the US citizen's passport to carry with you in case you're not traveling with him. Carry a copy of the marriage certificate even if you are traveling with him, however. The same is true if you're transiting through the UK. The UK is also covered by a regional proclamation, and so the rule is no different for the UK than it is for Schengen area. So if you left from Luxembourg and you traveled to Amsterdam and then you flew to the United States, it's the same as if you traveled from Luxembourg and went to London and traveled to the United States. You'll have to have a negative COVID test within 3 days of boarding your aircraft. And then you would need to contact or understand whatever quarantine requirements there might be for that specific state. But you will be able to travel because you're married to a US citizen.
Okay. Question number 6. My husband and I are traveling regularly to the US on a tourist visa B2 because we own property in the US. However, since March 2020, traveling with a tourist visa has been on hold, obviously. Does owning real estate in the US make a difference regarding traveling? Is it not our primary residence?
No, unfortunately, owning property in the United States is not an exception. And so you would need to qualify under the regulations for a situation. Unfortunately, as you've described, it does not qualify. So again, you could travel outside of the US or travel outside of the Schengen area rather, and then enter after 14 days, or it may be necessary to wait for the presidential proclamation to be.
Okay. Question number 7. The CDC considers vaccinated individuals having one of their approved vaccines, albeit emergency approval only, so far for 3 vaccines. So given the DCC's lack of approving the AstraZeneca vaccine, is there an issue for someone who has the AstraZeneca vaccine? Need they request another vaccine for Luxembourg in addition to visit without the extra restrictions? Or should AstraZeneca vaccinated people tell authorities they are fully vaccinated and follow requirements for vaccinated individuals?
An excellent question, and one for which I don't have an answer, other than to say right now, the vaccination status of a traveler is not added into the matrix regarding your eligibility. So right now, whether you have the Pfizer or the Moderna or the Johnson & Johnson or the AstraZeneca vaccine, it doesn't matter because none of those will make you more eligible to travel into the United States. Right now, the only requirement other than having a valid travel document and a national interest exception is that you have a PCR test within 3 days of boarding your flight. It is an interesting question, though. I know that AstraZeneca hasn't been approved in the United States just yet. And so it will be interesting to see. I know that the United States has not indicated that they are going to be developing a vaccination passport at all for folks to be able to travel into the US if they can prove that they've had the vaccinations. So right now, it isn't even on the table as far as something to be considered to allow you to enter. I don't know if that will change in the future. But as we've said at the beginning of the webinar, it's really important to understand that this is kind of a snapshot in time where we are right now. And please do check back on our website because if anything changes, we'll be sure to update it there.
Okay. Question number 8. Can we go to the USA for professional reasons? Some of our employees have to go to the USA to follow trainings, qualification, type and airline transport pilot license. If yes, do they need a specific or special visa, maybe C1D or C1 or D or not? A passenger lives and in transit in the Schengen area. Could he go to the US before boarding? Does the passenger need a negative PCR test or less than 72 hours and provide in the same way a negative antigen test? Are there some forms and certificates to fill up in order to enter to the USA? The arrival, do the passengers need to be quarantined? Are there different restrictions according to the different states?
There are definitely different restrictions regarding quarantining state that you intend to travel to. So yes, absolutely, there are exceptions for certain categories of travelers. C1D, which is a pilot, transit or crew member visa, there are exceptions for them. There are exceptions for C1D travelers to go to the United States for training. The United States feels that air travel is very important. It's critical right now, certainly for cargo transportation as well as for passengers. And so they have made an exception for pilots to be able to carry out their duties as a crew member as well as receive training in the United States. So if you were to, it depends on the circumstance. And I think before I get too far into the weeds here, it's probably best for this individual to send us an email so that we can explain it, because it doesn't really pertain to a lot of other people out there perhaps. But pilots do have the exception. We can issue visas to them. And they qualify for a national interest exception. They also do travel, do qualify to travel to for training purposes, for mechanical purposes, if a plane needs to be fixed in the United States, if they need to retrieve an aircraft from the United States and fly it back, those kinds of circumstances are covered under a national interest exception guidance that we've received from Washington. So please do send us an email and we can explain more. And they do have to have a negative COVID test, for sure.
Okay, a specific question about Connecticut. Question number 9. If I have 2 vaccinations, do I need to do a test prior to arrival? If I have 2 vaccinations, do I need to quarantine? And if so, for how long in the state of Connecticut? If I have a negative test within 3 days prior to flying, do I need to quarantine? And if so, for how long in the state of Connecticut? Are PCR tests acceptable proof of negative COVID-19 status? If I stay in Connecticut, are there any restriction traveling into the state of New York or Massachusetts?
Well, that is very specific to Connecticut, but I'm happy to answer that. Of course, as we've mentioned before, the vaccinations don't come into play with regard to your eligibility to travel. If you are issued a national interest exception, you are able to travel, you will need to have a negative PCR test, and it is sufficient. You just test, you don't need an antigen test as well. If you through Amsterdam, that Amsterdam requires an antigen test, but US regarding what might be necessary for any connecting flight. There are no connection, or there are no direct flights from Luxembourg to the United States, as everyone knows. So you're going to connect to somewhere to make sure that your airline lets you know what other kinds of requirements might be for your connections.
Okay.
You require a PCR test.
Question number 10. We are Luxembourg citizens. Our children, son, daughter-in-law, and grandchild live in the States, and normally we spend 6 months with them. So since January 2020, we did not see them, and we are waiting to travel again. In June, my visa expired. So when we returned to Luxembourg last year in January, I submitted my documents for renewing my visa, but as COVID came, I got no appointment. As the immigration of Europeans is so far not allowed, my question is, do I need to redo the paperwork for the visa? Is there a date when Europeans can travel again to the States?
Okay. There isn't currently a date. We don't have insight on that, unfortunately. It really all depends how we all get beyond the COVID virus, of course. And we hope as much as everyone that that happens very quickly. So right now there isn't a date. And when it is possible to make an appointment and come in for a visa appointment again, we'll certainly advertise that on our website. We'll try to broadcast that on social media and all of the different avenues that we have. So make sure that you're following all of that. Because your visa application, your original visa application is more than a year old, you would need to resubmit it. Unfortunately, you would have to fill out that paperwork again. So yes, but don't do anything until such time as we have reopened appointments and we're able to accommodate a request for a B1 interview. And I'm very sorry that you're separated from your family during this really difficult time.
Okay, thank you. The last question on our agenda here will actually be answered by
I already answered.
our chairman. Paul, you're on mute. Oh, but I will read it out to you. What about when US citizens would like to visit Luxembourg? How can we find out the legal requirements?
Okay. I think we have already discussed that, and we will provide additional information on our website tomorrow. But I know that Jackie needs to get on to some other responsibilities. So it's now time to go ahead and bring this to a close. First off, I want to sincerely thank Jackie. Not only did you give us all very valuable information, but you did it in a very caring and very human sort of way. And I know on behalf of all of our audience, they are deeply appreciative to know that this is not just a mindless bureaucracy working, but there are people involved who care and are trying to go ahead and do the right thing. So thank you very much for engaging with us for tonight and for your help and assistance. We will stay connected with the embassy, and we encourage everybody to go to the embassy's website to go ahead and look up additional information. And at the same time, whenever we have information, we will go ahead and we will pass that information on to our audience. I want to remind everybody that even though we got a little bit turned around to starting this is a joint presentation tonight between Amcham and Luxembourg and our very good and dear friends LACC NYC in New York City. And we are happy to have them for partners. We're delighted. I think we have 40 people from the United States who have joined us for this presentation tonight. We will see if we can put something together that we can publish on our newsletter next week that covers and reinforces the same messages that we've made tonight, and we will stay connected with the embassy. So having said all of that, and having said hello to Tony, I want to turn the microphone over to Nicholas, who is the secretary of LACC NYC, so that he can go ahead and do a quick close, and then we'll let you all get on with your day. Nicholas,
Paul,
it's yours.
for just a moment.
Sure,
Paul?
please, Jackie.
Okay, so sorry. I just wanted to mention that I'm sure that there are questions that get answered during the presentation. So please do take note of our Luxembourg consular at state.gov email address. Send us an email and we will answer your question for you. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jackie. And actually, I'd like to second what Paul said. It's been immensely helpful for all of us here assisting your presentation to have the technical details, but also to have the humanity and the face of you and your team behind it. We all understand it's a difficult phase for you, for people in Luxembourg, obviously for us here on the US side, and so I'm sure that we'll all go through with it. Paul, thank you very much for your kind words, and thank you very much for the excellent work in organizing the presentation today. We're really thrilled at the Luxembourg American Chamber of Commerce here in New York to partner with Amcham on this, and to be able to also have the audience here in the US informed on this matter. As you in Luxembourg, we're in the business of building bridges between Luxembourg and the US, and so it's obviously also of paramount importance to know when people are actually allowed to take those bridges again. And we look forward to a time where we will have all our friends from Luxembourg be again able to come here, and ourselves be again able to go to Luxembourg. So thank you very much, Paul, and in the name of the LACC, very happy to have seen so many of our members tonight. And Paul, back to you.
I think it's time for us to go do other things. Thank you all very much. And we wish you, if you have further questions, send them to us. You know, we'll help. This is an ongoing process. So the rules will continue to change, and we'll try our best collectively to keep you updated as best we can. And again, Jackie, thank you so much for your kindness, your professionalism, and your help. Ladies and gentlemen, good night. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is a bit like herding cats, isn't it?
Probably any kind of
But,
Zoom
you know,
meeting or.
but I mean, I think at the end of the